Tonight we continue our segments on the MBTA plans to raise fares and reduce services. Our guest is from an organization with a focus on transportation as it affects the environment. We'd like to welcome from the Conservation Law Foundation staff attorney Rafael. Thank you very much for being with us, Rafael.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, talk about the way this is really being rolled out here, because there's a choice between fare increases and even deeper cuts in service. So, well, isn't that unavoidable?
There's a clear requirement for the MBTA budget to be balanced, and there is no doubt that there's an operating budget gap for this year of $161 million, and there's an obligation for the board to come up with a solution to this. It is, however, the way it's being proposed is a false choice. It's sort of set up scenario one is heavy on the fare increase and still has some significant service cuts, and scenario two has draconian service cuts and still a very significant fare increase. And that's seen sort of as the two options. You can have more fare increase or less, and more service cuts or less. When in reality, the MBTA should really be looking for help from the legislature and from the governor to come up with a better solution. Because
yes, but talk about the fare increases, because by one standard, let's say increases on the mass turnpike tolls, this is terrible. On the other hand, if you look at other transit systems around the country, it looks normal.
Well, the comparison that has been made that the prices of other transit systems has never taken into account the quality and the length of service that we get here in Boston. And one of the major differences is that we don't get any service at night. The T closes down. And in most other major cities, the T either continues all night long the way the subway does, the way it does in New York, or in other places there's night owl service, or at least some of the lines are still open. Here, everything shuts down. So it looks to me, when you look at those prices, that we're currently actually fairly priced, and by doing any kind of fare increase, particularly associated with any service cuts, we're really sort of out of line.
What about some of the service cuts the T is talking about, and well, the buses? I mean, they might not be heavy lines as far as the use, but I guess the sheer number of these lines is pretty big.
I think that they're proposing to eliminate 101 weekday bus lines out of 173.
Weekday?
Yes. So those buses would be completely eliminated, not just during certain time periods, but completely eliminated. So it's hard to say that those are underutilized bus lines. That's what people rely on in order to get to work, to school, to their medical appointments. It's serious.
What about some of the other moves that he's talking about? Some weekend adjustments, maybe no trolleys between Ashmont and Mattapan, maybe shut down the E-line. Is that a big deal? Because you've got the number 39 bus where the trolleys go on the E-line.
I mean, for the commuter rail, for example, they're planning to shut down the commuter rail completely over the weekend and after 10 p.m. And there are people who are working during those time periods, and this is how they get back and forth to work. There are people who are going into Boston or out of Boston for certain destinations for recreational purposes, and those people are going to end up either not being able to do that, or they're going to be driving, which isn't good for anybody.
Well, you said all commuter rails after 10 p.m.?
Yep, all commuter rails. There's no distinction.
So that affects the Red Sox, the yep. Bruins, the Celtics?
Absolutely.
By the way, do you really think the T is serious about this, or do you think that maybe there's some intentional overkill here to get people riled up, and then there's this nice sort of a pullback?
They've been asked that question at the public meetings again and again, and they've answered that they are serious about it, that they feel like they're left with no options, and that because they have to balance their budget. I think what they're proposing is draconian. There's no other way to look at it, and that what is missing is a request to the legislature and the governor for help.
By the way, how badly is that help needed? Because I've also gotten these signals that this is only enough for 1 year.
That's the saddest part in the story, that I've described these service cuts as draconian and the fare increases as drastic, as bad as they are. They don't solve the problem. They, at best, solve the operating budget for 1 year. And next year, there's going to be another gap of at least $40 million, and the year after, an additional gap. And this says nothing about the long list of maintenance needs that the T has, or any other capital needs.
And of course, these maintenance needs are abnormal, I understand, between, if you can have a comparison between the T and some other systems around the country.
I think a lot of public transportation systems are facing similar problems. We have a situation here where we have an old system, obviously, And so there are a lot of needs there, and we have a heavy debt load, and as a result, there have been years of additional neglect.
By the way, we keep hearing even the T people talk about the expansion projects, and this is what the foundation had a hand in with the Big Dig agreement, the mitigation agreement. Is this maybe something that maybe the T should have been more reluctant to do? Maybe this expansion didn't bring in enough revenue to cover its expenses?
There was a great article explaining the history in the Boston Globe this weekend that described very well that what happened here is that in order for the Big Dig to happen, because of the negative air quality impact, there was a requirement to do something to balance that out. And the requirement was that the state chose to build public transportation projects because that is the most effective way of countering the negative air quality effects of additional car traffic through Boston. And so that was a great way to approach it. And those projects were not supposed to be paid for by the T, they were supposed to be completed by the T. As part of forward funding, the idea was to make sure that the T has a budget and lives within that budget going forward. The T got a dedicated revenue stream from the sales tax that was supposed to pay for these projects. Unfortunately, the predictions and the estimates for the sales tax were much too high and didn't pan out, and as a result, the T ended up in a place where it didn't have enough revenue in order to cover those expenses. And that's how we got into the situation. And what we need is a correction from the legislature. I don't think there was anything wrong in the original idea. It's just, since it didn't work out the way it was planned, we do need to address it.
Of course, even apart from air quality, if you had the kind of cutbacks and fare increases that T's talking about, what would that mean for traffic congestion?
It would be terrible. There's a slogan in St. Louis that, in a campaign to avoid similar fare increases and service cuts, or at least, and they did that in part successfully, that said that some of us use it, but all of us need it. If you're somebody who never takes public transportation but drives, you're not going to be pleased to see all those additional cars on the road when you're commuting to work every day.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
From the Conservation Law Foundation, Rafael Mares. Up ahead, we'll have Vida Hispana with Marga Troncoso.